Today we'll be travelling 40 kilometres south of Bordeaux city itself, down to the sweet winemaking region of Sauternes. So 2,000 hectares of vines in Sauternes, comprising 5 communes of Sauternes, Beaume, Fargues, Prégnac and Barsac, making really world-class dessert wines. Over time develop incredible aromas of apricots, stone fruit, peaches, some citrus character as well, and when that botrytis rot really takes hold, the botrytis gives the wines a certain spice and a certain saffron character. Famously paired with, in France, dishes such as Roquefort cheese, comparing that sweetness against the saltiness of the cheese, and also, most famous of all, the perfect accompaniment to go with foie gras. The grapes here that they use to make the Sauternes is Semillon, Sauvignon and a little bit of Muscadel, but the majority of it is Semillon, about 80% Semillon they use here. Incredible soils, great water retention. There's a mixture of clay and sand and gravel. If you look, we're on a slight slope here. At the top of the hill over here we have Caterer and and it goes all the way down to the bottom, and the row of trees at the back is where the river Garonne is. So I'm stood here on the banks of the river Garonne, which is one of the 2 rivers which splits off the river Gironde. One goes north and becomes the Dordogne, and this one goes south and this comes the Garonne. So we're at the bottom of the slope of the hill. Sauternes is just up to my left, all the way up to the top of the hill there, and then just behind me you can see where the Ciron river hits the Garonne river. So the Ciron is actually comes out a few miles further up inland out of a very, very cold underground stream, so it's freezing cold water. On its journey down to the Garonne, it's all surrounded by trees, so it's kept very, very dark, so it doesn't get warm at all. So when eventually it hits this very broad, very sun-exposed river, which is slightly warmer, just in this area here, first thing in the morning you get all these mists created. So this is really the secret to the success behind the creation and by the formation of the Botrytis cinerea noble rot. So even though it doesn't look very exciting, this is where it all happens. So this is Semillon, very underripe at the moment. We've still got another month, another 6 weeks or so until it really starts to ripen up. At the moment, very tart, very green, all full of acidity and no sugar. But Semillon is great for making sweet wine because when it's mature and when it's ripe, it's a very, very thin-skinned grape variety. And what happens is in that misty, humid, damp conditions of early morning, as we talked about the convergence of those 2 rivers, what happens is in a very misty atmosphere like this, there's a fungal rot which affects these grapes. It's called Botrytis cinerea, or more commonly known noble rot. So what noble rot does is it covers the outside of the grape, and it puts tiny little perforations in the skin of the grape, and what happens is the grape naturally starts to dehydrate. So the grapes end up quite shriveled, quite raisin-like, and really inside that all you have is just really super sweet, concentrated, sugary grape juice. The problem with it is that it doesn't develop in a very uniform manner. So what you might have is on a bunch of grapes like this, you might have 10 or 20 berries that actually start to get the botrytis. So the trick for the winemaker and for the people managing the vineyards is what they want to do is they only want to take those very, very rotten grapes. So what they'll have to do is they'll have to come through the vineyard literally with a pair of tweezers, inspecting each bunch and just picking off the very, very botrytis affected grapes. A couple of weeks later or a couple of days later they might come back and some of the other grapes have started to rot as well. So what happens is that they need to go through the vineyard over several times. We call them trees, so they need to come through the vineyard on several different trees, inspecting the bunches and just taking off those rotten berries. At a place like Caterer and, for example, which has 80 hectares which are under vine and are used to produce wine, they might have to go through the vineyards up to 10 times. So that will be hand-picking, individually selecting berries from the equivalent of an 800-hectare vineyard. When you're only getting a shriveled berry with a tiny bit of juice out, the yields in vineyards in Sauternes are very, very low. On average, probably in Bordeaux, in red Bordeaux, the best quality wines are making hectares of around 40, maybe 30 to 40 hectolitres per hectare. In places like Sauternes, maybe some of the biggest chateaus might be making up to 20 hectolitres per hectare, but at a place like Yquem, they might be down to something like 5 to 9 hectolitres per hectare. So that's not an awful lot of juice out of your vineyards. They tend to say that in Sauternes, one vine will make 1 glass of wine. Usually in the rest of Bordeaux, 1 vine will make an entire bottle of, say, red wine. But in Sauternes, it's just 1 vine that makes 1 glass. So that's one of the reasons that the wines are so expensive. So here we are at Chateau Yquem, in the heart of the Sauternes region. There's a lot of, when it comes to the reds, a lot of people are kind of not really sure which is the favourite of the first growth. Maybe people prefer Mouton to Latour, or maybe Lafite to Margaux. But when it comes to sweet wine, pretty much the greatest sweet wine in the world is generally considered to be Chateau Yquem, and here we are. So it's a 106 hectare property. About 80 of those hectares are actually farmed and actually used. Many, many years the estate was managed by the Le Salus family until it was bought out in 1999 in a complicated transaction by Bernard Arnault of the Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy Group. It's now managed by the extremely talented Pierre Lerton, who also co-manages Cheval Blanc. As you can imagine, the quality of the winemaking here is of the highest quality. They don't produce a second label for the sweet wine, so anything that's not up to standard is sold off to negociants. Great vintages of Chateau Yquem over recent years have been the 1967, the 1983 vintage and the 2001 vintage. With more than 200 producers in the Sauternes region, there's 26 classified growths, 12 of them being Premier Cru and 14 of them being Deuxième Cru. The region produces around about 500,000 cases a year, and when you look at the hard work, the skill and the dedication that goes into making these wines, even though they are expensive, they're well worth seeking out.